After working with many nutritionists, reading books, and practicing trial and error on my own body, I have finally found a way to control my weight without deprivation. I call my program Summersizing, and summersizing is not a diet. Diet is a nasty four-letter word that conjures up negative thoughts of sacrifice and obsession and guilt. I'm obsessed with TV. How wrong our parents were when they said we should only watch an hour a day. Stop wasting your time reading books. When you're younger and you see something that really speaks to you, it's indelible in a way that's not the same as when you're an adult. So I'll always love reading books and making movies that resonate with young people. Learning is acquired by reading books, but the much more necessary learning, the knowledge of the world, is only to be acquired by reading men, and studying all the various facets of them. I need to continue reading books, and I like to learn about different people in the world, different people with success in and outside of football. I was an introvert really. I spent a lot of time in the crib reading books, staying out of trouble. There's always an anxiety about playing literary characters because one of the great joys of reading books is that you can create your own vision of things. I learned how to cook, began reading books on food. I began to understand about nutrition. It never had occurred to me that what you ate could affect how you felt. It could affect your health. It seems obvious now, but at age 23 or 22 or whatever I was, it wasn't obvious at all. I tried to get into comics initially after I graduated Clemson in 1994. I spent a year trying to get in, and I quit reading books because not getting in made me sad. My history writing was based on what I saw in strange, exotic places rather than just reading books. I am a crazy online shopper. My husband always jokes, another box arrived. Airplanes used to be my sanctuary for reading books, but now I have to peruse gilt sales. In 1969, we emigrated to Australia. It was a big change. The heat, the flies, and the completely different tinned meats. The shock was so great, I stopped reading books for nearly a year. When I was 9 I spent a lot of my time reading books about the history of comedy, or listening to the Goons or Hancock, humor from previous generations. I never had a single female professor throughout my whole education, from the beginning of university to the end. Even all the books were about men. I never really liked reading books about the history of science, and I never really understood why. If you spend all your time reading books that you only pretend to understand, year after year, there isn't much room for anything else. I always wrote. I wrote from when I was 12. That was therapeutic for me in those days. I wrote things to get them out of feeling them, and onto paper. So writing in a way saved me, kept me company. I did the traditional thing with falling in love with words, reading books and underlining lines I liked and words I didn't know. I was a library rat and a bookworm. I read all the time. I walked to school reading books. I read under my desk. I have always loved reading books for children and young adults, particularly when those books are mysteries. I got a dog and am trying to elevate. I'm working out, eating healthier, reading books. Make It Out Alive is going to be a reflection of all of that. The fact is that our kids aren't reading books, or frankly, much of anything lately. Schools are underfunded, some schools even closing their libraries. Parents have to realize that it's their job, and not the school's job, to get kids into the habit of reading for fun. I have given up reading books. I find it takes my mind off myself. My advice is this: for Christ's sake, don't write a book that is suitable for a kid of 12 years old, because the kids who are 12 years old are reading books for adults. I read all of the James Bond books when I was about 11, which was approximately the right time to read James Bond books. I teach 18 to 21-year-olds, the Harry Potter generation. They grew up as voracious readers, reading books in this exploding genre. But at some point, I would love for them to give Umberto Eco or A.S. Byatt a try. I hope A Discovery of Witches will serve as a kind of stepping stone. I really like knowledge and reading books and just generally immersing myself in information. Taking trains and trams in Berlin, I noticed people reading books, not pocket-sized devices that bleep as if censorious, on which even Shakespeare scans like a spreadsheet. Remember that just because major publishing is having trouble, that doesn't mean people have stopped reading books. Printed books won't go away, but e-books won't go away, either. I've given up reading books. I find it takes my mind off myself. When you have mastered numbers, you will in fact no longer be reading numbers, any more than you read words. When reading books you will be reading meanings. I wanted to escape small-town USA, to dismiss the boundaries, to explore. My life experience came from watching movies, TV, and reading books and magazines. When your culture comes from watching TV every day, you're bombarded with images of things that seem cool, places that seem interesting, people who have jobs and careers and opportunities. When I'm not writing or tweaking my computer, I do embroidery. When I'm not plunging into the past, tweaking, or embroidering, I'm reading books about history, computers, or embroidery. Why are fanatics so terrified of girls' education? Because there's no force more powerful to transform a society. The greatest threat to extremism isn't drones firing missiles, but girls reading books. It's funny that I got to do On the Road because the thing that had the biggest impact on me growing up was reading books. I was very inspired by the book and this spirit of Dean Moriarty and how envious we all are of somebody who can be that carefree. One of the maddening ironies of writing books is that it leaves so little time for reading others. My bedside is piled with books, but it's duty reading, books for book research, books for review. The ones I pine for are off on a shelf downstairs. No matter how much time you spend reading books or following your intuition, you're gonna screw it up 50 times. You can't do parenting right. I grew up reading books about heroic collies. If a spectator with a philosophical mind, somebody accustomed to reading books, gets the same kind of information in a movie, he might not fully understand it. Cambridge was a joy. Tediously, people reading books in a posh place. It was my fantasy. I loved it. I miss it still. Computers allow us to squeeze the most out of everything, whether it's Google looking up things. So I guess that tends to make us a little lazy about reading books and doing things the hard way to understand how those things work. I remember that already as a child I was often intensely interested in things, obsessed by ideas and projects in many areas, and in these topics I learned much on my own, reading books. I finished all the math books by 3rd grade and most of the reading books, so I was considered disruptive. You stay teachable most by reading books, by reading what other people went through. I did the traditional thing with falling in love with words, reading books and underlining lines I liked and words I didn't know. It was something I always did. My life is politics, reading books and exercise. When it comes down to helping kids, a lot of ways for education to move forward is through music because that's exciting to kids. Reading books and going to a bookstore is not that exciting. I'm constantly reading books on God or the absence of God and atheism. I've been changed watching films or reading books or hearing music, and that helps you to live your life. When I was reading books for Seesaw Girl, I came across several references to the fact that in the 11th and 12th centuries, Korean pottery was considered the finest in the world. I liked that, the idea of a little tiny country being the best at something. I went to something like 6 different schools before the age of 12, so I was always the new girl and had to make friends quickly. It was difficult at the start because I was very bookish. I was literally sat in the corner reading books, with no friends. Ours is an age of pedagogy. Anxious parents instruct their children more and more, at younger and younger ages, until they're reading books to babies in the womb. I found out a long time ago that if I indulged by stuffing my face with great food, lying about reading books and watching TV or talking on the phone, I was not a happy camper. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.